Now, as teachers, we've all had those little moments, those little experiences which we remember, and maybe successes or failures in the teaching, and they stick with us and they ultimately inform us of our practice. Well, I'd like to tell you about one of mine, and this goes back probably about 10 years ago. I was teaching at a private language school here in Barcelona. I was working with a group of 12-year-olds and we were using a course book, and the topic of the day was unusual pets. Now, I guess that on any other day I might have just asked them to turn to page whatever in the course book, do that vocabulary activity which would have involved words and phrases for describing, talking about unusual pets. But on that day, I decided to do something a little bit different. You see, when I was 12 years old, I had an unusual pet. And so rather than asking my students to go for the course book, I said to them, you know, when I was your age, I used to have an unusual pet. I'm not going to tell you what it was, but I'm going to tell you about it, and I want you to guess what it was. And my unusual pet was a grass snake, you see, and in describing it, I was able to contextualize some of the words and language that students would go on to meet in the course book. And you might be thinking, what's so special about this? This is not brain surgery. This is not rocket science. I'm sure you've done stuff like this, but I suppose that it's because I almost didn't do that. It was almost a last minute thought, and I certainly wasn't expecting my students to be as engaged as they were. I mean, they were interested. They really wanted to know what my unusual pet was. They were curious. And when they found out that it was a grass snake, they wanted to know more. And it makes sense, doesn't it? You know, as teachers, a big part of what we do is introducing topics. But topics alone just don't work. You can't say to people, let's talk about unusual pets. Let's talk about the future and use will to do so. Or let's talk about holidays. You need a way in. You need to make your students interested, engaged, and curious, and story is the answer. I mean, this makes sense. If we want the language to be meaningful, story is the most human way to do it. Human beings are creatures of narrative. And by human beings, I mean all human beings. There's this tendency when we talk about learners, language learners, and story to think about young learners. But story and storytelling are not niche. They're for everybody. Storytelling and story for adults, for teenagers, for students who are doing business English. Storytelling is for everybody. Human beings are creatures of narrative. We live story. We use story to understand the world, to form relationships, to entertain ourselves. We find ourselves in stories. We lose ourselves in stories. We use stories to educate, stories to communicate. Story and language are inseparable. And just as it's impossible to sleep without dreaming, it's also impossible to teach without using story in some way or another. But just as it's very possible to sleep and not be aware that you're dreaming, I never remember my dreams, it's also very possible to teach without being aware of where the story is or how to use it. But it's always there. It's right in front of you. It's there in the materials, it's there in the language, and most importantly, it's there in the people. The story is in your students, the story is in you. Now, this is the first in a short series of videos titled Why Story, or Reasons for Using Story, and this is all in the run-up to the brand new Lesson Stream Story course. This is a course which will teach you to use story, to develop your storytelling skills and confidence, and help your students do the same, and to take away a bank of story-based teaching ideas and lesson plans. It'd be great to have you on board. If you'd like to know more, just click on the link underneath the video. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.